Welcome to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past shows are archived. You can find them at ArtistFirst.com and send your questions and comments to DJ@ArtistFirst.com. Now here they are, Michael and Margaret Lines.
Thank you very much, C-Man. And we are the dynamic duo of Internet radio.
Oh, my.
I've heard. Hey, welcome to another Soul of the Everyman show. But this one's sort of a special show because this is the last show of 2018. I mean, we do have two more shows. We have at least one more show before the end of the year. And then I think the new year, we start our new show on the first Tuesday. But both of those shows are going to be best ofs. So you folks are going to get a treat. You're going to get to listen to the best of the Batcave Internet Radio team duo stuff that we can find.
Okay.
So tonight, we are coming up to the end of the solar year.
Right.
Every year, the 21st of December marks the end of the solar year, or what we call the solstice. I think it's a human conceit to call it the end of the solar year, but that's how we mark it. It's the coldest, longest night in the northern hemisphere.
Well, it's the longest night nor the shortest day, but it marks the changeover.
Right, but it's a very northern hemisphere, Western European centric, because in South Africa or in Antarctica, it's the longest day. So, from our point of view, it's the longest, coldest, darkest night. From their point of view, it's like, yay, the penguins! Let's flap as hard as we can because it's going to get darker from here on out. So the penguins right now are whooping it up. Doing whatever penguins do when they're really excited, which we don't want to think about too much. But in the northern hemisphere of this spinning little planet spaceship that we all live on and are trapped on for the rest of our lives, and we're all going to die here, that place that we call Earth,
you are
it is the longest, darkest, coldest night of the year in New Jersey, and so that's what we call the end of the solar calendar, and regardless. As human beings, that sort of lack of light and seeing everything, all the greenery and all the lands being sort of brown or gray or covered in snow, reminds us of our own of the ephemeral nature of our own existence, and the fact that our own lives are cycles upon cycles, and it's often philosophically looked at as a moment to reflect and to take stock, and then to look forward and to prepare. Certainly, the land is fully asleep. The leaves are asleep. All the life, the plant life is withdrawn into the earth, and so a lot of legends and myths and philosophy have grown up around this period as sort of the that renewal, that
the sleep that leads to regeneration.
Mm-hmm. People liken it to the cycles of the moon. This is the cycle of the sun. The moon every month goes through the death of the moon into the new moon. And interestingly enough, on this solstice, the 21st will be nearly a full moon, if not just after a full moon.
No, I think it's just waxing into it.
Oh, just before the full moon?
Right before the full. I think the full is on the 22nd.
Right, so it'll be close.
Right. They're in close proximity to one another.
So it's interestingly enough, if you look at it from that point of view, if we go back to our sort of, northern hemisphere look at it, the full moon would be marking the birth of the new year. So you may have noticed that some of the lunar calendars, things that are celebrated on lunar calendars this year, like for argument's sake, Hanukkah, were a little bit early because of the way the moon cycle lined up. But the solar cycle is a lot less variable,
Mhm.
and so it's been the 21st of December ever since my blue painted ancestors were dancing around a fire. Your ancestors were not doing that.
No.
But they might have been dancing around a fire, but they weren't painted in blue, and they weren't William Wallace screaming freedom and running down a hill and stuff like that.
I don't know what my ancestors were doing. They all had their own private islands, is what I understood.
Oh man, we have to go hang out with your ancestors.
The problem is the islands have all united.
Oh man, that was a bad idea.
Yeah, they all had their own languages, all their little islands, and they all had to run it their own way.
Well, the Philippines is often called the Thousand Islands because there are so many little islands, and all throughout, all throughout Polynesia and throughout that part of the Pacific Ocean. Southeast Asia, but it's really ocean peoples. It's really what do they call it? Not Polynesia. It's some other. Basically, these island cultures grew up somewhat in isolation, and because of that, there was a lot of uniqueness, a lot of interesting human culture that came out of that isolation. And I guess my recent forebears were from Ireland, and that's a tiny island. I'm an islander.
Yeah, cold, but yeah.
Hey, Ireland's a warm little island. We're friendly.
Oh, okay.
Hey, we're not putting. We actually didn't paint ourselves blue and run around like crazy people. That's the Scots.
Oh. Okay.
The Scots are, well, let's not go into it, but they've got their own problems. But we're going far afield.
Far afield.
The graphic that we picked for tonight's show was a quote by Thoreau, and it's short, but it's a good one. It basically is winter is a season of recovery and preparation, and I think viscerally we all feel that. You should look upon this season as a time, as a quiet time, and it's difficult, Margaret, because where we are in our current sort of modern day celebration or our modern day take on winter is that we try to ignore it as a society. We try to push it as far away from ourselves as possible. We try to have as many lights on as possible. Remember the show we had with Dr. Bump where we're saying that we're staying awake longer and longer and longer tonight versus our ancestors. We try to have as much bloody things going on as possible. You have celebration after celebration after celebration. You have to run from one to the next, from Thanksgiving to Christmas to New Year's, and then you barely get to take your breath in between those times, and it doesn't give you, I think, which is a very necessary component, which is the quietness, the time to draw back.
Right, to reflect. We have all of January. It's February, they start pushing Valentine's Day. But all of January, after you get past New Year's, it's winter.
Yeah, and I think we need a little quiet time. I think we don't get that. People talk about the peace of the season. And if you don't try to actively pursue it, which is an interesting concept, you have to actively pursue peace. But if you don't actively kind of seek out and disassociate yourself from the go, 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 you'll never find that peace.
Mm-hmm.
It's very elusive anymore.
Well, it's realizing that the base experience is go, go, go.
Mm.
Instead of peace. I don't know if it ever was peace.
Well, I think certainly not in our lifetimes.
Not in our lifetime, no.
No.
The modern culture is, with every technology that's been coming in, we've had to adapt and adapt and adapt to its repercussions. Not saying it's bad,
No.
but you have to change.
Right, and I think there's sort of a certain nostalgia for this sort of old-timey Christmas, but it probably hasn't truly existed since the late 19th century, maybe even before that. Probably around the time of, let's say, the early Industrial Revolution, electrification, and it spread throughout, the U.S. and of course throughout Europe. You went from, by the time where we are right now, 7 o'clock in the evening on a late December evening, it would be pitch black. We'd have if you were take ourselves back 150 years, you might have a couple of oil lanterns or a candle or two, and you'd burn those for a while after have a little dinner because the sun would still go down at 4:30 in the afternoon. You'd have your dinner probably pretty soon before or after that time. You might read a little bit by the fire or keep the fire going, of course, for heat. And then you'd have that quiet time. You'd have literally a long winter's night. And if you look at that lovely poem, it just settled down for a long winter's nap. It's really what we're talking about is those long evenings where after a little bit of perhaps reading by the fire, you'd go to sleep and you'd be asleep for 12, 13, 14 hours before the sun came up again,
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't that be a lovely thing, people? Think about it. Think about putting your head down and not having to get up out of your nice, warm, snuggly bed for 12 or 13 hours. To us, it would seem an eternity. We're lucky. We're lucky. As an American, Western European people now, we put our heads down at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, and you're up again at 6 in the morning. So you are going to bed in the pitch black in the middle of the night and getting up in the pitch black. The circadian rhythm of the sun is certainly no longer respected at all.
Mm-hmm. This is true because there's a lot of distractions. And it's wonderful to have light and electricity. It would be like constantly. Whenever we've had power outages.
Yeah.
Right. You just sit and you would have to go to sleep early because you can only read so much by candlelight.
You've got it. You've got something there. That's exactly right. And we've had a couple of times now. What I mean that is in the past several years, we had Hurricane Sandy, and we've had a couple of less well known and less well named storms that have
ice storms
and so on, where the power is knocked out, and you are suddenly transported from the middle of the beginning of the 21st century to the end of the 19th. You really are scrambling for candles and matches. And as you say, after a period of time, when you have and now you're living in a sense, especially where we live, you've got nothing but a fire for heat. You don't have any running water after a period of time. Your well pump is no longer running, so you'd get some, there's some pressure left in the system, but not much. You can't really cook anything. Your microwave and all those other wonderful appliances don't work. So you're kind of eating, and nothing is being refrigerated. So you're living in essence in the 19th century, late 19th century, but worse because they were ready for it. They had all the stuff. They knew what to do when the lights went out. And we're very much children out of place, as a people. When the lights go out, we're scrambling, and then we're very inconvenienced.
Right. No, well, they were facing their day on the sun. So when the sun set, and you knew the sun was going to set, you were prepped for it, or mostly prepped for it.
Yeah. And it would be a constant thing. It wouldn't be something that was an interruption to your daily life. It would be your daily life. And I think the converse, Mark, is exactly the same. Is that what we now think of as vacation time. So those were the lazy days of summer. Those were the long, languid days when you didn't have to heat the house. You didn't have to. Going to bed with the sun meant going to bed, late into the evening, like 8:30.
Well, you also had long days.
And long days, or early up in the morning with the sun.
When you were to make hay while the sun shines.
Right, you would have to. Well, if you were farming or anything like that, you would certainly take advantage of the longer days to get your food crop or whatever crop you were putting together.
Just that the whole mindset was more closely in tune to the environment around you.
Right. Still having technology. These aren't people. These our great grandfathers and grandmothers were living in a technological age, but it wasn't so ubiquitous. It wasn't so oppressive as it is today.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Well, the fact that you have internet and lights and access to any bit of information you need right at your fingertips, this is a very different society.
Yeah, it really is.
Because it used to, back then, you needed a book, you needed to learn how to read and write. And if you needed information, you had to go someplace to find it.
Right.
You couldn't just ask a question or type a question in. That was unheard of.
Right, and the pace of the flow of information. We haven't really talked about that, but the other sort of intrusion into our rhythms, into our circadian rhythms, into the rhythms of the year, is that the cycle of information, whether it's the news or the weather or whatever it is 24/7, 365. And I'm not saying that we're looking back and saying, well, we'd love to have one newspaper a week or something, but the news of the day would be something that would be gathered and then consumed and digested for a period of time. An event would happen, and you would hear about it maybe weeks afterward, but it would be news to you. Then you'd have to think about it and discuss it. You'd have to say, well, what does this mean to me? So the pace of the unfolding of events was measured. It gave you some time to get perspective on things. Well, with the march forward of technology, we no longer have that. We have a fire hose, or a torrent of information available at all times. It can literally just overwhelm you, and there are people who, they have addiction services now for people who are addicted to the internet, if you will. I think it also detracts from the peace. It detracts from. It makes it such an effort to pursue quiet, to pursue the peace of any time of the year, regardless. Even this is the quote unquote the quiet time of the year, but there's no quiet time of the year.
No, it's always the next thing, especially when you're connected to all kinds of modes of communication, whether you're calling or texting or internet or whatever. It's constantly coming in, so you have to choose and know when you are becoming overwhelmed, which is something that we've never had to do before. No one sits back and goes, well, am I being overwhelmed by all this info?
I think people feel it at a visceral level, but they don't know. They don't do what you just did, which is basically step back even from that and say, is this doing something to me? And I mean that in broad. I think people individually may have that thought. But your other, I mean, we both looked over at these demon boxes that we call smartphones. Them damn demon boxes. No, I mean, but you are literally never out of touch. It used to be, and again, we're sounding more, or at least I'm sounding more and more like, yeah, you kids today. But it used to be that when you got into a car, you were kind of alone with your thoughts. You turn on the radio maybe, and you might listen to a little music, but you had the moment to sort of contemplate, and something wasn't constantly binging and banging and booming and making you even then, be connected. You can't walk away from your oracle. The oracle sits on your shoulder and bugs you constantly. Do you want to know this? Do you want to know this? Would you like to know this? You want to know something? Come on! I got something to tell you.
They have everything from Siri to
oh God,
the other one that it talks back to you.
Alexa.
Alexa. Yeah.
The other day, there was some article. I think it was a parrot or something like that. Some talking bird had ordered a bunch of. It had ordered fruit. It had ordered toys. It had ordered, it had ordered a whole bunch of things by talking to Alexa, and making purchases online. Get me some fruit. So Alexa ordered it fruit. Fruit shows up for the parrot. So that's a humorous thing, but in essence, that the fact that something is always perched, constantly waiting to take your every casual utterance, or even the casual utterances of an animal, which is just mimicking sound, and turn it into action. And I think what's so it's more important than ever. We said pursuing peace. But I think what's more important than ever is that in order to not be overwhelmed, you have to cultivate your ground so much more religiously, or so much more rigorously, or diligently.
Diligently. It's got to be a constant conscious choice, because everything else that's coming in is unconscious and nagging. Okay, that word hit, huh?
Do you want to do this? 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 Shut the F up! I don't want to do any of it. You're casually going down the page of your news stream on your computer, and some silly, you just casually brush by something, which then blossoms into this giant video screen, takes over your whole computer, and starts saying, "You want to do this?" I'm like, no, I don't. And I don't want to hear from you. And then you're frantically searching how to turn this silly thing off.
Yes, that's true.
It's nagging.
Well, but that's what I mean. It almost forces you to cultivate a level of patience that's superhuman, because you're dealing with a machine that is not human, and it will only do what it's programmed to do. So it's programmed to take every opportunity it possibly can to interrupt whatever you're looking at and take your eyeballs over.
Right.
So it's understanding that your eyeballs are precious. And this is exactly what it is that everything out there wants to grab. They understand that
everything's trying to grab your balls. Your eyeballs.
Oh. All right.
It's trying to grab your attention. It's look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. It's terrible. I'm getting the look. Come on, man. That was funny. No.
Now tell me how that was different from what we're exactly talking about.
It was funny? I'm trying to illustrate a point.
I don't think so.
Your point, though, is perfect, because it used to be you'd have these passive advertisements, and they'd try to grab your attention. Then there were commercials on TV, and they would try to be louder and interrupt the show and grab your attention.
My point is that you choose whether or not you're going to interact. And so when something comes in and it's not what you want, you do not have to interact with it.
But you have to expend energy sort of at a constant level to fend it off, because it's very pervasive and pernicious. It really comes at you. It's not passive anymore.
It's like small children. They have no boundaries. So advertising is looking for a way to get past your boundaries.
Yeah, and they try every trick in the book. They try to play on your heartstrings, or annoy you, or make you laugh, or shock you.
It's trying to get your attention, but the point I'm trying to make is that you must be aware of what's going on around you and decide that your heart peace is much more important than any of it. The peace in your heart is far more important than any of it. And so once you abide there, none of it matters. None of it matters. And if it turns out a site is far more annoying, or the slightest provocation brings an advertisement up, I don't care how wonderful or interesting the article was supposed to be, I'm not going back there. I don't care. You are not worth me having to be exposed to this piece of nonsense.
And I think that's exactly correct. But I think it takes a certain level of balanced maturity, of training. You have to train yourself to do that. And I think the uninitiated, or the kids, or the ones who are coming into this, have an extra kind of skill that they have to learn in order to remain grounded. And that's where you get these things where the kids are addicted to their smartphone, or feel abandoned if it's not working properly.
Children are always looking for attention. So if they're not getting attention from mom and dad, they will go to their whatever devices that are there and feed off of that. So they need to be fed, consciously fed. It's got to be a choice made by, whether it's the parents or the caregivers or the people that are around them. It's got to be made that, no, this is where you need to be right now, not over here. This is the ground. This is what it means to be human, not in the game or in whatever, distracted by this, amusing though it may be. You're here to find out who you actually are, not who you are pretending to be. And I think this is the main reason why people are very confused, because they haven't been allowed to be grounded in their own humanness.
Well, I think I would turn around and say that it's much more difficult. It's more of a challenge now than it ever was, both for parents and for the kids, to not be drawn away from their humanness by this sort of insidious information torrent. I think there's a new sort of skill, or a new sort of strength that's needed here.
Well, it's, again, if you're expanding awareness, you need to be taught how to make choices consciously. And conscious choice is not necessarily taught.
Well, let's make a conscious choice to go back to the studio for a little break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more about how to get quieter.
The Timeless Esoterica radio program with Dr. Bruce is broadcast on the fourth Monday of every month at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern on ArtistFirst.com. We explore topics including the paranormal, alien life, mysteries, conspiracies, hidden history, oddities, and much more. Each show will feature a special guest with exciting and thought-provoking discussion. Always keep an open mind, an open heart, live forever, and remember Dr. Bruce believes in you.
There is a Reaper is the story of 5-year-old Christopher Aaron and his life-changing struggle with leukemia. Winner of both the Indie Bragg Medallion as well as the reader's favorite silver medal for memoir, There is a Reaper has more than 100 Amazon book reviews and a 5-star rating. It has been described as life-changing, spiritual, a must-read. Just released on Audible and iTunes, this memoir is also available in paperback and on Amazon Kindle for only 99 cents. Get your copy of this life-changing memoir today.
Taking God on Patrol is a first-person account of the world of law enforcement from the perspective of a Christian police officer in the 4th largest city in America. From speeding car chases to the crossing of the thin blue line, author Mark S. Cariner seeks to find God's biblical truth in a behind-the-scenes look at law enforcement. And check out Mark's newest book, The Tactical Heart. Both are available at Amazon.com.
The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lyons, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere.
Thanks for joining us on The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Now back to your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Hello.
Hello?
And we're back, I think. Can you hear me, Mark?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. When we welcome back to the second half of the Soul of the Everyman show, and as we went to break last half hour, we've been talking a little bit about the quiet time of the year that we find ourselves in now. The solstice, the winter solstice, which is at the end of this coming week, or this week that we're in, it has always sort of represented a transition period. If you look at it from energetically, or if you look at it from the point of view of some of the of ancient cultures, this would be celebrated as sort of it would be a time of potential disaster. There would be, the sun would be seen to be fading, getting lower and lower and lower in the sky. the darkness was growing and the light was shrinking, and oftentimes there would be ceremonies to mark the shortest day, and to try and, in essence, bring the energy of life back into the world. Using fire or using other types of ceremonies to mark this event, and
just being acknowledging the fact that the darkness, this is the darkest time of the year, because it's the shortest day and the longest night. But it also marks the fact that the length of time for day will grow. We are at a pivotal point.
A pivotal point.
And the length of time for night shall shrink.
Mm.
So the lighting of the fire had a lot to do with lights in the darkness. You will maintain your light in the darkness.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
That solstice night, that fire would represent the Yule log, in essence, would represent the carrying of the flame through the darkness into the new dawn, and then growing again, back into the growth part of the year.
Right. And it's it allows for the reflection at that point, because you must maintain your light in the darkness. So it becomes focus. And what is it that you see when you focus? A review of your own life.
Mm.
During that year specifically. What has worked, what hasn't, what events have happened. And not to be, and it's letting go of the past.
Mm.
The burning too is significant of burning the past. You don't bring it forward. You don't want to bring the darkness forward. You're choosing to take steps into the light, and you acknowledge the fact that the darkness has been surrounding you.
Some of the things we do now are outgrowths of those earlier traditions, like New Year's resolutions, for argument's sake. The Yule log, we just mentioned the Yule log. Your idea of a New Year's resolution, we've kind of dumbed it down into these silly things that people do, but it was supposed to let the past be buried, be burned, to die with the old year, and to bring something new, to bring some new, some growth, some change into the new year.
Some change. The idea was that this will change your behavior, because you are letting go of things that you had identified yourself with, and things that you may have outgrown.
Mm-hmm.
So it's time, because the cycle has ended. Whatever this had blossomed into and then died back into. Now you burn away the husks of your past and take conscious steps, because you also know that when the husks had died, the seeds had re-entered into the ground. That's the other thing that winter represents, is that there is new seeds that have been planted. And if that's the case, it's an incubation or a gestation period. So it's understanding that you need that gestation period for new things to begin to grow from within, be birthed in the spring.
And that's very much like the lunar cycle, the crone, the mother maiden, the maiden, the mother, the crone, and the darkness, the silence, the void. That the point of the year that we're in right now is very essential. It's the void. It's the sleeping seed. It is the death of the old year, but it's always the seeds of the new year at the same time.
And if you think of the seed itself, the seed that's planted into the ground, its form must die for the life that is within to grow.
Yeah.
So its outward form must die. The husks of the shell must fall away and die into the earth, and it will feed its whatever nutrients were in that husk into the new growth. So it's complete transformation at that point. And to understand that this is what life is, you've got to let go of the things of the past. Good or bad makes no never mind. You must make a decision that you must go onward. You can't hold on to the things of the past because it is death at that point. You're holding on to the husks.
Yeah, and it also shows the clockwork of life. It shows that, when they would talk about somebody's age in that time, they would say, "How many winters do you have, or how many darknesses of the year have you gone through?" You mentioned earlier today the fact that the darkest night in anyone's life is the 9 months you spend,
in your mother's womb.
In your mother's womb, and from that slumber and peace, you emerge into a transition into a new world of life.
I had come across, wish I could find it again, but there was an article that was talking about how when the egg and the sperm come together, there's a moment where light is emitted. And I thought that was absolutely fascinating, because in the darkness of the womb, life sparks.
I remember that exactly, and it's there is an electrochemical transformation when one gamete meets the other. The egg has a coating, a covering that it's slowly worn away by tens of thousands of wannabes, and then there's the one like, "Hey guys, step aside, I'm coming," and that one gamete that does get through, that one head of the sperm that does get through, as it pierces the membrane, there's an electrochemical, in essence, an electrical transformation, and that barrier becomes impermeable. It goes from something which is needs to be electrochemically worn away, but as the one gamete gets through the barrier, there's an instantaneous change, and there is a burst of light. Of course, it's incredibly small, but we are all, the beautiful image is that we're all born in a burst of light. Mm-hmm. And it is in the darkest of dark places. You're certainly within not only an incredibly small space. You're all of what is to be you is contained in two cells, but as these cells become one, there's a spark. Mm-hmm. Now, we could say, oh, it's just electrochemicals, or we could say it is the spark of creation. It is divine spark. It is spirit entering flesh.
It is a wonderful analogy, if you think about it, because both gametes and both ends of the spectrum have got to go through arduous travel.
Yes.
In order to come to a set meeting place. And once there is fertilization, and it's allowed to be implanted and begins to grow, that whole journey is done in the dark, except for the one moment where the two meet and form a completely new, genetically different being.
Right. Embodiment.
So it's such a wonderful analogy or exercise in thinking of how your life and your life's journey actually unfolds for you from the moment of birth.
Well, moment of conception.
And the moment of, we're taking it forward. Let's say that is the base of the pattern of how your entire life goes.
I see what you mean. Yes. Sorry. Yes.
And then it becomes mirrored again at the moment of birth.
Yes.
And then you have milestones that happen within your own life that do the exact same thing. You're traveling in the darkness on a pathway, and then suddenly a spark happens, and you know that you are no longer the same.
Yes.
And we all have that in our journey down here. It's appreciating that, how precious that is, and taking stock of it, because many times, because of the busyness of our lives, you don't get the moment to sit back and look at it and go, that was part of my life.
The very essential and crucial moment to do that. I think at our peril, we allow this busyness and this kind of ungroundedness to take us away from that, because those moments of transition are more significant than any Facebook update. Well, I mean that's what tries to distract you from them. All these binging and buzzing. The symbolic reenactment of the year, the clock of the year running to its end and then being renewed, it feels significant to us because we are in our own way clocks. We are in our own way running towards into darkness and then back into light, and the majesty of your life is reflected in the majesty of the universe and of the world around you. But if you allow yourself to be distracted, your life becomes, you miss that majestic moment, and you don't get them back. There aren't any redos, there aren't any respawns of let me go back and do that moment over again. You've got to be present. You've got to be aware.
Try to. Or again, this journey is about learning how to be aware of what life actually is.
She's having a lovely time here. Lead is our guest tonight. She's bugging us tonight, so she probably wants to go out or run around. Lead is our constant nudge. But go ahead. I'm sorry, Ma. She's interrupting here.
That's okay. But it's again going back to understand that there are cycles. And just even the marvel of birth. You were a being that was relying solely on your umbilical cord for everything that you needed. And when you were born, suddenly there's all these senses that didn't do anything in the womb. Okay, you wound up practicing breathing reflexively. And what were you breathing? You were breathing the amniotic fluid, but not really breathing. Just the muscles were doing the reflex. And then when you're born, you have to take your first breath. And you're not breathing fluid anymore. You're breathing air. And then suddenly there's light. And your eyes have to engage. And then suddenly the sounds that were muffled suddenly become sharp and clear. And then tactile. You were surrounded by softness in the womb. And suddenly you're in a place where there's sharps and cold and flat, hard, and the you could see how you could be so completely overwhelmed that that's why babies sleep so much.
Yeah, well, or the environment is so different. There's a lot of processing that has to happen there. We see as babies, as children, we knew we had to sit back and reflect. Sleep is something that we were given and was necessary. And I think we deny ourselves that at our own peril. Once we've reached adulthood, we still have to process many things. They're not the same things. We've gotten used to the sharps and the flats and the ears and the eyes, but the new information that's constantly coming in has to be balanced.
Well, it's just, this is what I mean by phases, though. I mean, you were basically a creature that was a water creature, and suddenly now you're a land creature and breathing air, and then now you're entering a realm where you're an e-creature of some kind, where you have to...
E-creature, I like it.
but you're that's another aspect of who you are that you've got to manage.
I really like that.
Oh, okay.
No, I mean, because you're not a sea creature, you're an E creature. That's great. All right, but it's true. We've and the lives that our humanness, our bodies are made for, are not the lives that we're living today. And so that stressor is something that requires a bit more balance. Go ahead. Sue.
What I'd like to, just a thought that occurred, but when you were in the womb, you had legs and arms and hands and lungs and eyes and ears, but you couldn't use it. I mean,
right.
Maybe you might stretch your legs out thinking, okay, this is what this is for. You would stretch your legs out in your mother's womb.
Right.
But it was only after that birth that you began to realize what all this is for.
Mm.
What if we're in the same state right now? That there are perceptions and talents that we have, but we're not really aware of because we're not in an environment that stimulates that.
Mm.
Like this life that you're having is actually a gestation period.
A womb of sorts.
Mm-hmm, the womb of the earth. You're living in the womb of the earth.
Hmm.
And when you make your transition,
you'll be breathing something other than air.
Right.
And seeing something other than the mundane light that we see.
Right.
I like it. Or senses that we don't currently understand how to use here or don't make a lot of sense here. Like sight doesn't make a lot of sense when you're in the dark.
Right. Exactly. But that's what I mean. So your potential is amazing as a human being.
Yeah.
And just that thought alone it just opens up a whole realm of possibility.
Well, and then you want to kind of roll that back into, let's say, people who have done the transition, who have done these NDEs. The impressions that they bring back are senses that we don't currently have. They're sensing things which they shouldn't be able to sense. They're bringing back perceptions and
memories
that they shouldn't be able to remember. So if you're born through what we call death here, if you're born into this new awareness out of the womb of the earth, you suddenly find that those things that didn't make a lot of sense down here are instantly available to you. You don't have to learn necessarily how to do this. It may be shocking and new, but it's like, oh yeah, I know how to do that.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, I believe that's our pattern. That's who we are. This is what we're going to go through. This is what we are presently going through right now. And not to slip into a despair. Because you don't know. Well, you didn't know to start with. and you managed to survive,
Yeah, with some help too, and the analogy is imperfect, but these people who go through the NDEs, there's always someone there that they meet who they feel is there to help them, there to comfort them, there to guide them.
Mm-hmm.
And all of us when we're born, we have the need for help and for guidance and for people to feed us and help us in our physical incarnation, and that spark of light that entered the spirit into the flesh. And when the spirit returns, or when it leaves the flesh, changed and full of its experience here, it has something else to do. That's a very I think it's a very interesting, if not almost enlightened, sort of perception about about these NDEs and what we're doing in the next. Maybe this is just we're just in a long womb down here.
They don't call her Mother Earth for nothing.
Right. Or the Buddhists would say that you have these lives with which to mature yourself for the next phase. And so what are they? There's cycles, like we have the cycles of the seed, and then coming into the light, and then going back into the seed. But you're growing, you're changing, and then you go, to something where you don't come back. You don't go back through the cycle of incarnation again. You've reached a different level,
of being.
Different state of being. You've gotten out of this womb, and whether it takes one lifetime or many lifetimes, I think that's immaterial. I think that's people counting how many angels are dancing on the head of the pin.
Right. Well, that's a limited view of consciousness.
Exactly. They want to quantify everything.
They want to put a handle on it and then manipulate it to say certain things that they believe. And it's like, leave yourself open.
Control.
Yeah. No, leave yourself open to explore and really begin to experience what being actually is. Many times there are no human words for this.
Exactly. Excuse me. And that's, I think, to take ourselves out of the equation and all of our rules and things. And, I had 7.5 lifetimes to get to enlightenment and so on. It's really comes down to another cycle, a different way of looking at, progression into darkness and then into light. It's our life out of darkness into existence here, back into darkness, and then into some other existence somewhere else.
Another spiral.
Mm-hmm.
You go round again, but you're coming full circle, but you're a level up from where you were.
And what are we? I mean, the analogy of our DNA is one giant spiral, one big helix. So it's so obvious that people overlook it. It's a spiral. Hello, it's not a circle. It is certainly circular, but it's also progressing. It's also moving.
Yeah. Well, if you continue to hang on to your past, you will continually have your circle.
There you go.
And be two-dimensional then. You won't take steps into any type of progression.
And maybe if you continue to hold on to your past, you have to incarnate again and again.
Until you get it.
Until you burn away, isn't that lovely the way you wrapped around to, burning away the past with the fire at the solstice time. We have an opportunity here to learn and to grow and to burn away at the end, burn away the past and step into something new.
And burning away the past is burning away anything that is preventing you from taking steps forward and upward, not
experience.
It's letting go of the negative. Maybe that's the best way to. You're burning the negative.
How would the Buddhists say it's letting go of attachment?
Understanding that anything that is of material, if you form an attachment to it, you are literally hanging on to the old form.
Yes.
You are literally hanging on to the old form, not allowing your consciousness to begin to embrace things outside of what you have thought or experienced. Making room, maybe that's the best way to term it. Make room.
And I think at this juncture we have to make room for the next show coming up. But, I've loved spending this year with you, and I look forward to spending the next year and many, many, many years in the future with you here on the radio and throughout our lives. And folks, we'd love to spend them with you too. So I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret. And thank you.
Listen, have a very good solstice.